Getting to Know the World's Greatest Artists, George Seurat, by Mike Venezia. George Seurat was born in Paris, France, in 1859. At that time, Paris was the art center of the world. As a young man, George worked very hard to find a new way of painting that had never been seen before. To make his paintings look different and fresh, George Seurat used scientific ideas he discovered about color, line, and shapes. Some of George's beautifully designed paintings seem to shimmer and glow with light. Others have the feeling of a hot, misty summer day. George Seurat is probably best known for inventing pointillism. Pointillism was George's method of putting little dots and touches of different colors of paint next to each other. Instead of mixing up red and yellow paint to make orange, for instance, George would put dots of red and yellow next to each other. That way, your eye would mix the color right on the canvas. George Seurat believed this method would make his colors appear more natural and real-looking, almost like colored light. Orange, you glad Seurat is putting us together? Yes, I think we'll have a much brighter future. George also discovered that the way he put lines and shapes in a painting could give the viewer a feeling of being happy, calm, or sad. In Les Chateaux, the dancer's legs and positions of the musician's arms and instruments are all pointing upwards to create a happy, fun feeling. In this painting below, the horizontal lines and shapes of the sandy shore and horizon give a feeling of a quiet, calm, relaxed day. The scientific ideas George studied about and used in his paintings are called theories. George learned about these theories in books that had been published at the time. Scientific discoveries were being made all over Europe in the 1880s. Every day, Europeans were learning more about medicine, photography, mechanics, chemistry, just about everything, including art. Up lines means happy. Straight lines, calm. Down lines, sad. Wow, these scientists are smart. Here he is over in his books. George Seurat grew up in a rather unusual home. His father preferred to live by himself a few miles outside of Paris. He visited his family only once in a while for dinner. Mr. Seurat had lost his arm in a hunting accident years before. He invented a device that allowed him to attach knives and forks onto the end of his arm. George's father was proud to be able to carve and serve a whole dinner roast at lightning speed. Sometimes dinner guests were surprised. One guest was probably George's best friend, Edmond Francois Amandine. Both Amandine and George were interested in being artists. They ended up going to the same art school together. He's saying to his friend, want to come to dinner next week? We're having spaghetti. I can't wait. In 1878, Seurat and his friend Amandine entered the best-known art school in Paris, the École des Beaux-Arts. At this school, students learned by copying statues and paintings done by great artists from the past. George found plenty of great works of art in Paris. Among his favorites were the paintings of the Italian Renaissance artist Raphael and early 19th century French artists J.A.D. Ingres and Eugène Delacroix. It didn't take long for George to get tired of copying other artists' work, though. Soon George stopped going to his art classes. He began spending more time thinking about how to make works of art that were really original, all his own. In 1881, when George Seurat was 22 years old, he set up a studio and began to follow his dream by creating wonderful drawings. In these drawings, George explored the importance of shapes and form. He used a smeary graphite and clay crayon on bumpy paper. Even though these drawings are black and white, they seem to sparkle with light. While George was working on his drawings, he began to experiment with color. George made lots of small paintings. He learned that by using crisscross brush strokes that went every which way, his paintings would appear to shimmer with light. One day, George and some friends saw the work of the Impressionist artists at an art show. The paintings of Impressionist artists Claude Monet, Alfred Sisley, Camille Pissarro, and Pierre-Auguste Renoir were the talk of Paris in the 1880s. Some of the works. Monet. These artists were interested in capturing a moment in a time of a happy everyday scene. They worked outdoors, quickly brushing colorful flecks of paint onto their canvases. Even though their paintings were quite colorful, George Seurat thought he could do better. He's saying, hey, Monet, that Seurat kid might be onto something. In 1883, George felt ready to begin his first important painting. It was called Un Bagne Esnires, The Bathers at Esnires. George chose a happy everyday scene, but went about painting it much differently than the Impressionists would have. George worked much more slowly. During the day, he went to the riverside and made lots of drawings and colorful sketches. He then brought them back to his studio and worked late into the night, carefully placing each figure onto his large canvas. George's finished painting was almost 6 feet high and 10 feet wide. There's the finished one. George Seurat spent more than a year working on his large painting. Bathers at Esnires was exhibited at a new art show that George and his friends helped set up. It was called the Salon des Indépendants Artistes. This was an important time for George Seurat. Not only did his paintings get a lot of attention, but George met and made friends with artists who would help him form a new group known as the Neo-Impressionists. George's new friends all liked his scientific ideas about color and composition. They often met at cafes to discuss their feelings about art. Soon George became the group's leader. George's artist friends admired him so much that they started dressing like him. They even trimmed their beards like George's and even wore their hats the same way. Here they all are at a cafe. The waiter says, here's the bill, Mr. Seurat. I'm not Mr. Seurat, he's Seurat. No, I'm not, he's Seurat. I think he's Seurat. Nope, it's him. Maybe he's Seurat. George soon began his next large painting. It was a scene of a small island where hard-working Parisians went to relax on the weekends. George worked the same way he had before. He made dozens of color sketches during the day, brought them back to his studio, and worked late into the night by the light of a kerosene lamp. After 2 years, George finished his greatest masterpiece, Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jeté. It was the first time George used pointillism over an entire surface of a painting. Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jeté is a very large too. If you get the chance to see it in person, you'll be amazed by what happens when you step back a few feet from the painting. The warm, sunny dots and cool, shady dots of color mix together to create new colors right before your eyes. When Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jeté was first shown, many people liked it, but some critics thought George's figures looked too stiff. They thought scientific theories about color and composition had no place in art and could make a painting look like it was made by a machine. George Seurat never listened to his critics. He knew that Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jeté captured the feeling of a beautiful and endless summer day that shimmered with warm sunlight. George Seurat went on to make drawings and pointillism paintings of all kinds of scenes. Some of his favorites were of the concerts, music halls, and circuses he loved attending. Sometimes George would travel to small seaport villages and relax by painting peaceful scenes of boats and harbors. George Seurat probably worked hardest on the colors in his paintings. Sometimes he would paint a pointillism border or even a whole frame to make sure his picture was surrounded by exactly the right colors. George Seurat got sick and died suddenly in 1891. He lived to be only 32 years old. In a few short years, he created a remarkable art style. George Seurat influenced many other famous artists of the time, including Vincent van Gogh, Paul Gauguin, Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, and Henri Matisse. All of these great artists tried versions of pointillism in their own paintings.